Jamie McIntyre, thanks for joining us.
No, welcome, it's good to be here.
What are the very basic lessons you think should be taught at school?
Well, I think, when I went to school, went to university and then I left there and I eventually wanted to start my first company, and I did quite well in Sydney and built a mobile phone company, but then I lost the business and almost bankrupt. And that's the time of my life I really looked for, I guess, a millionaire mentor. And I realized at school I wasn't taught financial education. I wasn't taught business education. So as a result of that, once I started learning what it took to be successful by studying wealthy people, I realized a lot of it was common sense. And I thought, this could have been taught in school, and if it had been taught in school, I would have avoided a lot of the pain that I went through of almost going bankrupt or not knowing how to grow a business or manage my money. So I think as a country, financial education is critical to be taught in schools, just to give teenagers a head start when they leave.
You travelled the world and met a lot of very successful people. What are some of the key lessons that you learned?
Yeah, I was fortunate when I left university. I'd spent a lot of money to go to university, and after a year I quit. I was doing accounting, and I realized it wasn't a career for me. So I decided that I really needed to get a real-life education, because university is effectively taught by people with their PhD in theory, and academic knowledge is great. But what I realized from some of my earliest mentors that I need a PhD in results, for people that produce real results in their life. So that's why I went and sought out teachers that had done that, and I realized I need an updated education for today's world. So I went and sought out, I guess the shortcut to success, if there is one, is finding someone that's already done what you want to do. And then at school we're taught not to copy. But I think to be successful, we need to learn to copy, and the Chinese are very good at that. But I don't mean take intellectual property, but I mean model success. In other words, find out what someone's done and then learn from them. And that's what I did. I travelled overseas. There wasn't many seminars back then that would teach you financial success or business success in Australia, 15, 20 years ago. So I travelled overseas. I got to meet and learn from people such as Anthony Robbins, and that taught me a lot about emotional mastery. It's not just good enough being financially intelligent, but you also need to become emotionally intelligent, and you can get yourself in a peak performance. You can outperform what you do if you can't manage your emotions. But leadership skills as well, from General Norman Schwarzkopf and people like this, where you can learn key distinctions that make a massive difference to your life.
What was the best lesson that you learned from your travels?
Yeah, there's probably a few, but one thing I learned from Tony Robbins many years ago, and it's still, I live my life by this, and it makes a big difference, is that I think most people overestimate what they can accomplish in 12 months, yet underestimate what they can accomplish in a decade. And that was so true for my life. My life transformed in a period of 3 to 5 years dramatically. But when you're young, you tend to be impatient at 21, 22 years of age. You want everything to happen now. And I guess a lot of people, we're all impatient to some degree, but we understand that if we take massive action now, our life mightn't totally change 6 months from now, 12 months from now, but we go 5 years or 10 years from now, our life can be in a totally different place to what it would have been. And I guess that's realised, not overestimate what you can accomplish in 12 months, but most people underestimate what's possible in a decade.
Australians have always been very big on investing in property. What's your view at the moment?
Well, it's interesting. Professor Stephen King came out in 2008 with the credit crisis and said Australian property will drop 40%. I and others disagreed. I went on radio at the time and said I believe that won't happen. It will rise as much as 20% before we see a correction. And a few years later we saw places like Melbourne that rose 18%. So, but my views have changed. I'm no longer bullish on Australian property. I've stopped buying Australian houses for myself. I'm not saying there's still not some money to be made in the Australian property market, but I think the best years of Australian property are over. I don't see a correction of 40% though, as some headline grabbers are saying. I just can't see the fundamentals having that happen, but I think we're going to see slow to moderate growth in the next decade, and in the short term we're going to see some volatility in house prices.